She greeted the mafia boss's Italian father. Her Italian words stunned the guests. My name is Nadia Quill. By day, I live in a world of structured silence, interpreting American Sign Language for classes at the City College. By night, I catalog history in the dusty, muffled quiet of the Riverton Main Library's late shift. Tonight, however, I was neither. Tonight, I was temporary staff, and I was in hell. The agency had promised logistics, back of house, and the email specified black pants, black shirt, comfortable shoes. Logistics, in my world, meant stacking chairs, checking inventory, maybe running boxes of programs from the printer to the check-in table. It did not, under any circumstances, mean this. This was the Lumen Glasshouse, a monument to architectural ego parked 30 stories above the blinking lights of Isola Heights. The building did not seem to rest on the ground, but rather floated on massive steel pylons, its walls made entirely of reinforced, pressurized crystal. It was a place built for people whose shoes cost more than my monthly rent, and tonight it was hosting the annual Riverton Philanthropic Gala. I had been on site for less than 5 minutes when my manager, a frantic woman named Tasha with a failing headset, shoved a heavy silver tray of champagne flutes into my hands. "You are not logistics anymore," she hissed, her eyes darting over my shoulder. "VIP lounge is short-staffed. Congratulations. You just got promoted. Smile, Quill, and whatever you do, do not drop anything." So I smiled, or at least I pulled my lips back. But my comfortable, rubber-soled shoes felt like cinder blocks on the polished marble. And my watch, my cheap, $5 plastic watch with the cracked face, felt obscene. I used it to time my neighbor's medication doses. Every man I passed wore heavy steel on his wrist that gleamed with Swiss precision. Silent and smooth, my watch just ticked, a loud, plastic sound in the wealthy, suffocating hum of the room. The air in the VIP lounge was different from the main hall. It was thinner, colder. It seemed to crystallize around one man in particular. He stood near the floor-to-ceiling window, not looking out at the glittering skyline, but watching the reflection of the room in the dark glass. Luca Verano. Even I, a woman who lived in books and silence, knew that name. He was the new Don, the young boss of the Verano family. The papers called him the surgeon, whispering that he was trying to scrub decades of blood off the family business. The rumor was he had taken the infamous Raven Gate port, a place of shadow deals and missing containers, and was attempting to drag it, kicking and screaming, into the light of legitimate global transport. He wore a suit the color of a wet sidewalk, tailored so perfectly it looked less like fabric and more like articulated armor. He did not smile. He did not drink. He just watched the room, his stillness a vacuum that pulled all the nervous energy toward him. He was cold, like polished steel. If Luca Verano was the cold front, the storm itself was his father, Don Salvatore Verano, Il Vecchio, the old man. His name was not on any guest list. His presence was a closely guarded secret, a ghost story whispered between security earpieces. The moment the private elevator doors slid open to admit him, the pressurized quiet of the lounge did not just get quiet, it died. Laughter stopped mid-breath. Men who ran corporations and owned small islands visibly stiffened. Don Salvatore was a relic, a man from the old country who carried an authority that legislation and modern money could not buy. The air crackled around him. Everyone was terrified. I was trying to be invisible. A ghost in a black shirt, navigating the ice statues and the silk dresses. I was backing away from Don Salvatore's path, trying to melt toward the service door, when I collided with him. A delegate, stout and red-faced, smelling of expensive brandy and entitlement, he had pivoted without looking, his arm catching the edge of my tray. It happened in that horrible, stretched-out slow motion. 3 crystal flutes tipped, splashing golden champagne onto the lapel of his gleaming tuxedo. They hit the marble floor not with a tinkle, but with a sharp, definitive crash that sounded like a small bomb in the dead silence. My blood ran cold. The delegate looked down at the spreading stain on his jacket. He looked at the shattered glass by his feet. Then he looked at me. His face purpled with a rage that was almost theatrical. "You clumsy, worthless idiot," he snarled, his voice loud in the suffocating quiet. "Do you have any idea what this suit costs? This is bespoke. You probably do not even know what that word means." My face burned. I opened my mouth to apologize, to offer a napkin, to do anything, but my throat closed up. Every eye in the room was on me. The librarian, the temp, the stain. And then a shadow fell over us. Luca Verano had moved. I had not even seen him cross the room. He stepped directly between me and the angry delegate. He crouched, a movement of unsettling grace, and picked up the stem of one broken flute. He held it up to the light, examining the fractured crystal as if it were a diamond. He did not look at the delegate. He looked only at me. His eyes were not cold. Not exactly. They were assessing, calculating, a dark, neutral gray. He smiled, a fractional tilt of his lips that held no humor, only a chilling curiosity. "How much?" Luca Verano asked me, his voice a low resonance that cut through the silence. "Are they paying you to endure this?" The delegate sputtered, his anger instantly vanishing, replaced by the pale sweat of fear. He finally recognized who he was dealing with. Before I could find my voice, another presence joined us, Don Salvatore Verano. The old Don moved forward, his gaze sweeping past his son, past the fuming delegate, past the broken glass, and settling directly on me. The room held its breath. I felt like prey, pinned by the gaze of the lion. My hands were shaking. I wanted to run. I wanted to be back in the library stacks, where the only judgment came from overdue book finds. But then I saw his eyes. They were old, tired, but sharper than the broken glass in his son's hand, and they reminded me of someone. They reminded me of Mrs. Emilia Pavesi, my old neighbor, the woman who had practically raised me when my own parents were working doubles, the woman who paid me in homemade biscotti and dog-eared poetry books, the woman who taught me her language because she was old and lonely and had no one else to speak it with. My fear did not disappear. It just settled. My spine straightened. I was a guest in Mrs. Pavesi's memory, and I would not disrespect her teachings. I met Don Salvatore's gaze. I dipped my head, just slightly, the way Emilia had taught me, formal, respectful, old world. My voice came out clear, not shaking, echoing in the absolute silence. The Italian I spoke was not the slang of the streets or the casual tone of a tourist. It was the formal, almost archaic language of Emilia's beloved Florence. "Onorato di conoscerla, signore?" "I am honored to meet you, sir." The shock in the room was electric. The delegate's jaw was open. Even Luca Verano's mask of perfect control slipped. His eyebrows lifted a fraction of an inch. He stared at me as if I'd just sprouted a second head. Don Salvatore looked at me for 1 second, 2 seconds, 3. His stern, weathered face cracked. He did not smile, he laughed. It was not a polite chuckle. It was a deep, warm, genuine laugh that echoed from his chest, shattering the tension into 1,000 pieces. He clapped a heavy hand on his son's shoulder, his eyes still twinkling at me. "Luca!" he boomed, the sound vibrating through the floor. "La ragazza ha stile." The girl has style. The entire atmosphere of the room pivoted. The tension vanished, replaced by nervous, relieved laughter. The delegate who had insulted me now looked physically ill. The power dynamic of the entire evening had just been rewritten by a night librarian. The party resumed, but the focus had shifted. I felt new eyes on me. Not just the curious guests. These were different. A group of men in ill-fitting gray suits, standing near the elevators. They had not been there 10 minutes ago. They wore cheap lapel pins, FCIB in small blue letters, Federal Commerce Integrity Bureau. I had never heard of it. My librarian instincts tingled. It sounded wrong, too generic. They were not drinking. They were watching. One of them pointed a smartphone discreetly in my direction. pretending to check a text. They were taking notes on me. The flash of a camera was subtle, shielded by a hand, but I caught it. They were documenting me. The girl who spoke the Dawn's language. Before I could react, a solid warmth blocked my view. Luca Verano had moved again. He was standing beside me, so close I could smell the faint, clean scent of cedar and something metallic, like the air right before a thunderstorm. He had not touched me, but his presence was a shield. He angled his body, subtly blocking me from the view of the gray suits and their cameras. He smiled again, that same calculating expression, but this time it was directed at the men by the elevator. It was a polite, social smile, but his eyes, even from this angle, delivered a different message entirely. It was a warning, a cold, steel promise. He turned his head slightly, his voice for me alone. "It seems, Signorina, you have just made the evening far more complicated. I did not go home, not right away." Tasha, the manager, tried to hand me my pay in a flimsy envelope, her hands shaking, her eyes begging me not to make a scene. I took it, changed out of the black server uniform in a bathroom stall, and went straight to the library. The night shift was my shift, and the familiar scent of old paper and floor wax was the only thing that could steady my nerves. My first act was not cataloging. It was research. The delegate, the man whose suit I had stained, his name was Arthur Wexler. It took me less than 10 minutes, using the library's access to philanthropic donor databases. Wexler was not just a delegate. He was senior counsel for a logistics group called the Cataneo Combine. My blood chilled again. For a different reason, I knew that name from the headlines. The Cataneo Combine was the shadow organization battling the Verano family for control of Ravengate. They were the ones rumored to use intimidation, bribery, and ghost corporations to undercut Verano's every attempt at legitimacy. I had not spilled champagne on a random guest. I had spilled it on the enemy. By the time I left the gala, Luca Verano had offered me a ride home. His armored sedan, a black behemoth that looked more like a bank vault than a car, was idling at the private curb. "My car is armored, Signorina Quill," he had said, his voice low. "It would be safer." I looked at him, the steel gray eyes, the perfect suit. Getting into that car felt like a transaction I was not prepared to make. "I appreciate the offer, Mr. Verano, but my bus route is quite safe." His expression did not change, but a woman at his side, dressed in the same severe black as his male guards, stepped forward. She was lean, with dark hair pulled into a bun so tight it looked painful. Her eyes missed nothing. She pressed a simple, heavy-stock business card into my hand. It said only, "Ari Santoro, Verano Security." "If you change your mind," she said. Her voice was flat, professional. I still had the card in my pocket when I got home to my apartment in Little Gilder. My building is the opposite of the Lumen glass house. Old brick, creaking floors, and a single, rattling elevator. I live on the top floor, a cramped attic studio that I charitably call the penthouse. The summons arrived the next morning. It was not mailed. It was tucked into the metal grate of my apartment door. The envelope was heavy, creamy cardstock, embossed with a seal Federal Commerce Integrity Bureau. My heart hammered against my ribs. I opened it. The language was dense, intimidating. "You are hereby summoned for mandatory questioning. Regarding your interference in a designated federal commerce event." It listed the gala. It listed my name. It ordered me to appear at a downtown address in 2 days. I am a librarian. I live by the Dewey Decimal System. I thrive on order, on statutes, on verifiable facts. This document felt wrong. I sat at my small kitchen table, the coffee in my mug growing cold. I looked at the seal. It was slightly pixelated at the edges, like a high-quality inkjet print, not a professional embossing. I looked at the citation code at the bottom of the page. Real legal codes follow a structure. This one was a jumble of letters and numbers. During my shifts, I often help pre-law students find resources for their mock trials. I have spent hundreds of hours shelving legal texts. I know what a real federal summons looks like. This was not one. It was a very, very good fake. That night, the fear was a physical presence in my tiny apartment. I was researching the FCIB when I heard it. My building is old. I know it sounds. This sound was wrong. Heavy footsteps on the final flight of stairs. They stopped right outside my door. My apartment has 3 locks, all of questionable quality. I held my breath. I heard a faint metallic scrape, a tool, probing the keyhole. My blood turned to ice. I was frozen, unable to move, unable to scream. The scraping stopped, a muffled curse. Then, a miracle. The thin, reedy voice of my neighbor, Mrs. Petrov, cracked through her door. "Who is it? I am calling the police." The footsteps did not walk. They ran. Heavy, pounding steps descending the stairs 2 at a time. I waited, shaking. For a full 5 minutes before I unlocked my door, Mrs. Petrov was peering out, her security chains still on. "I saw them on my new camera," she whispered, pointing to a tiny lens over her door frame. 2 men, big, in dark coats. "You are okay, Nadia." I nodded, unable to speak, and locked my door again. The camera. They had left because of the camera. I went back to my laptop, my fingers flying, the Federal Commerce Integrity Bureau. The phone number on the summons, I called it. It rang 4 times. A hollow, empty sound, then disconnected. No menu, no operator. I looked up the website. It was a single, slick landing page. Stock photos of cargo ships and American flags. There was no About Us section. No list of statutes, no directory. It was a shell. The fear was starting to turn into anger. This was a lie, a performance meant to terrify me. As I stared at the screen, a shadow passed under my apartment door, a whisper of paper. I froze. I crept toward the door, my heart in my throat. A plain manila envelope was on my welcome mat. It had not been there a minute ago. My hands trembled so badly I could barely open the flap. It was not a letter. It was a photograph. It was me. Yesterday, I was at the circulation desk at the library, laughing at something a patron had said. The photo was grainy, taken from a distance, probably with a zoom lens from across the street. It was a picture of my normal, boring, safe life. Underneath the image, a single line of typed text. "Don't speak Italian to people who aren't yours." That was it. The fake summons was a tactic. The attempted break-in was an escalation. This photograph was a promise. They knew where I lived, they knew where I worked, and they knew what I had done. I had Ari Santoro's card in my wallet. I had refused Luca Verano's protection once. I would not be stupid enough to do it twice. This time, I met him on his territory. The Verano headquarters was not a flashy skyscraper. It was a solid, century-old granite building near the port, disguised as a maritime insurance firm. Ari Santoro met me at the door and led me to an office that smelled of old leather, espresso, and the faint tang of the nearby ocean. Luca Verano stood when I entered. He wore a simple white shirt, the sleeves rolled up, revealing strong forearms and a watch that looked more expensive than my car. He did not look surprised to see me. "Signorina Quill," he said. He gestured to a chair. I did not sit. I placed the summons on his massive mahogany desk, then I placed the photograph next to it. He looked at the summons first, his expression unreadable. He tapped the pixelated seal. "The Federal Commerce Integrity Bureau," he said, his voice flat. "It does not exist." He picked up the photograph. His jaw tightened. The neutrality in his eyes hardened into something dangerous. "Cataneo," I said. It was not a question. "Yes." He tossed the photo back on the desk as if it were contaminated. "Cataneo. They created the FCIB. And another one, the Bureau of Port Standards, BPS. They are ghosts. Illusions created by their data mining firm to frighten suppliers and blackmail politicians. They flash badges, send letters, and disappear." "The men at the gala, the ones in the gray suits," I whispered. "Theirs," he confirmed. "They were there to observe, and then you spoke." He walked to the window, looking down at the working port, at the massive cranes lifting containers. I will stand between you and the storm. Nadia, that is my promise." He turned back to me, and the full weight of his gaze pinned me. "But you must understand what you did. You were a librarian, a temp. You were invisible. And then, in front of everyone, you spoke to my father in his own language. You showed him respect, in their world. In Cataneo's world, that was not respect. That was defiance." He leaned against the desk. "You are not just a girl who spilled champagne anymore. You are a symbol. They cannot get to me. They cannot get to my father. So they will start with you. They will pull on the string you are holding, just to see if the monster on the other end flinches." I left his office with Ari Santoro's personal number in my phone. The storm he mentioned felt very, very close. I was back in my apartment, the 3 locks bolted, a chair wedged under the doorknob, when my phone rang, an unknown number. I expected a deadline. I expected a threat. I answered. "Signorina Quill." The voice was deep, gravelly, and laced with the same old-world accent as Mrs. Pavese. It was not Luca. It was Don Salvatore Verano. "I find myself," he said, the sound warm, "missing the sound of Florence. I would be honored if you would join me for lunch. Casa Piero, tomorrow, 1 o'clock. It was not a request. It was a summons. And unlike the one I received this morning, this one was real. Casa Piero was not a restaurant. It was a private home, an old brick villa with deep arches, clinging to the cliffs above Raven Gate. The only sounds were the distant cry of gulls and the clink of silverware on heavy porcelain. Ari Santoro had driven me, the entire ride silent, and handed me off to a man at the door who looked like he had stepped out of a 1950s photograph. Don Salvatore Verano was waiting on a stone terrace, shaded by olive trees. He did not rise, but gestated to the chair opposite him. A simple lunch was laid out, bread, cheese, cured meats, and dark wine. He poured me a glass of water himself. "You have your neighbor's eyes. Signorina," he said, not as a compliment, but as a statement of fact. "You knew Amelia Pavese?" My voice was a startled whisper. "Everyone knew Amelia," he said, a sad smile touching his lips. "She was the heart of Little Italy for 60 years. She would come to my father's bakery and read poetry to him while he kneaded the dough. She believed beauty could soften even the hardest bread." He took a sip of wine. "So, it was she who taught you?" I nodded, the knot of fear in my stomach loosening, replaced by a wave of nostalgia. "Every Tuesday, for 10 years, she paid me in biscotti. We read Dante. She said if I could understand his vision of hell, I could handle anything Riverton threw at me." "She was not wrong," he mused. He leaned forward, his sharp eyes appraising me again, but the coldness was gone. "Your accent," he said, "it is remarkable. It has the clear sound of Florence, but the discipline of the North. Amelia was from Firenze, but you speak with a precision she did not have." "I am a librarian. Signore, I am precise by nature." "Ah," he smiled, truly smiled. The il vecchio of reputation faded, and I saw the man Amelia must have known. "A librarian, of course. You catalog, you organize, you bring order to the chaos of words. I understand you now." The shift was palpable. I was no longer just a temp who had caused a scene. I was Amelia's student. I was a woman of order. In his world, that meant something. The scraping of a chair on stone announced Luca's arrival. He looked stressed, his jacket off, his tie loosened. He gave his father a respectful nod, but his eyes were on me. "Padre, Nadia." He dropped a tablet onto the table, the sound cracking the peaceful quiet. "It is as we thought. The Cataneo Combine is moving fast." He brought up a series of emails forwarded from panicked sponsors. "They are using your summons. Nadia. The fake FCIB is sending official notices to every major donor for our port fundraiser next week. They are warning them that the Verano family is under active federal investigation for commercial interference, and that any associates, namely them, will be subpoenaed." "They are creating a shadow of illegitimacy," I said, the words tasting like ash, "using me as the excuse. They are scaring away our money, Lucas said, his voice hard. The gala is how we fund the port's new security upgrades, the ones that make Cataneo's smuggling impossible. Without those sponsors, we lose the contracts. We have 1 week to counter this. Don Salvatore looked at his son, then at me. So, Luca, what is your strategy? More armor, more lawyers. Luca paced the terrace, a caged predator. Lawyers are too slow, and this is not a problem armor can solve. It is a public relations war. Cataneo is painting us as the monsters, and Nadia as our first victim. I looked down at the harbor below. The cranes were still, the water flat. Mrs. Pavesi's voice echoed in my head. Dante did not just write about hell. Nadia. He wrote the way out. Then you stop fighting their war, I said. Both men turned to look at me. The librarian had spoken. They are using a lie to create fear, I continued, my voice gaining strength. You cannot fight a lie with a private truth. You have to fight it with a public one, a bigger one. Go on, Don Salvatore said, his eyes bright with interest. They are scaring away the wealthy sponsors. Fine. Forget the wealthy. Go for the people. Cataneo is painting your port as a place of federal investigations and shadow deals. You have to show them it is not. You have to open the gates. Luca stopped pacing. Open the gates! Host a free event, not a gala. A community night. Call it Open Port Night. Bring in the food trucks from every neighborhood. Get the local jazz trios, the artists from the Gilder District. String up lights on the cranes. Invite the whole city. Show them the port belongs to Riverton, not to shadowy federal bureaus. Use their lie against them. Show them exactly what they are threatening to take away from the community. I looked at Luca. They are using language to create fear. You use language to build trust. There was a long silence. Don Salvatore siad back, swirling the wine in his glass. Luca stared at me, his gaze intense, assessing me in a way that had nothing to do with the gala and everything to do with the woman in front of him. Ari Santoro, Luca said, pulling out his phone. Clear my schedule for the next week, and clear the manifest for Container Yard 4. We are hosting a party. He looked at me, a flicker of something new in his eyes, admiration. You want to build trust, Nadia. You are in charge. You organize it. Ari will be your head of security. Whatever you need, it is yours. The next 5 days were a blur of engines and heartbeats. The Verano machine, when pointed at logistics, was terrifyingly efficient. What would have taken the city a month, they did in 48 hours. The vast, empty container yard was transformed. Tons of steel were moved to create a massive amphitheater. Miles of string lights were hung between the giant cranes. Ari Santoro was my shadow, her professionalism a cold comfort. She scouted every angle, every rooftop, mapping out threat zones while I mapped out vendor locations. The only time I was alone with Luca was late in the evening. 2 nights before the event, we were standing on the temporary stage, practicing. He was meant to introduce his father, and I was meant to introduce a community arts grant. You have to address him formally, I instructed, my voice echoing slightly in the empty yard. Not just Padre, you are presenting him to the city, not to the family, Illustre Signore Verano. He tried to repeat it. He was a man who could command a port, who could face down his enemies without flinching, but formal Italian terrified him. He kept stumbling over the past participle, his modern, American-inflected accent butchering the beautiful Florentine grammar. No, you are using the passato prossimo when it should be the imperfetto, I corrected gently. You are describing a state of being, not a completed action. He ran a hand through his dark hair. Frustrated. I run $1 billion shipping empire. Nadia, and I sound like a tourist ordering a coffee. I laughed. It was a real, unrestrained sound. You sound human here. I stepped closer. The air between us changed, became charged. I could feel the heat radiating from his body. Try again. Estado un honore? He watched my lips. Estado. Close. I did it without thinking. I reached out and put my hand lightly on his wrist. His skin was warm. His pulse was a steady, Heavy beat beneath my fingers. Relax your jaw. It is not an order, it is a sentiment. Feel the words. He looked down at my hand on his wrist, then he looked up, and his eyes met mine. The frustration was gone. Something else was there, something deep and resonant that silenced the distant hum of the city. He turned his wrist, his fingers brushing mine. The spark was so intense it was almost painful. I pulled my hand back, my cheeks burning. We should practice again. Later. His voice was low. He gestured to the edge of the yard, where a steel platform overlooked the entire port, the city lights glittering beyond. Walk with me. We stood at the railing, shoulder to shoulder. The city was a carpet of diamonds. Below us, the string lights for the party looked like a captured galaxy. This is impressive. Nadia, what you have built here. I just made the calls. Your men did the work. No, he said, turning to face me. You gave them the vision. They are loyal to me, but this has inspired them. I have never seen them work like this. He paused. You are not afraid. After what happened at your apartment, after the threats. I am terrified, I admitted, gripping the cold steel railing. But I have been poor, and I have been overlooked. I know how to be invisible. I am tired of being invisible. He watched me, his expression softening. Who kept you safe before I came along? Nadia Quill. The question hung in the night air. It was honest, vulnerable. I did, I said, my voice quiet but firm. I have always taken care of myself. It is what I know. I looked up at him, at the man who moved in a world of armor and shadows. But tonight, I do not want to be alone. He did not hesitate. He did not ask permission. He moved slowly, giving me every chance to pull away. He cupped my face, his hands rough but impossibly gentle. His thumbs brushed my cheekbones. The kiss was not a collision. It was a landing. It was slow and warm and steady. It was a promise of safety in a world that had suddenly become lethal. It was the cedar and the ocean, the steel and the strength. I melted into it, my hands finding his shirt, gripping it as if he were the only solid thing on earth. 10 paces away, standing at the edge of the platform, Ari Santoro did not look at us. She kept her back to us, her hands clasped behind her, pretending to watch the sunset paint the sky in shades of bruised purple and orange. She was giving us a moment. The massive floodlights of the port clicked on, one by one, illuminating the yard in a harsh, industrial glare, pulling us back to reality. And far away, from a dark window in a warehouse across the water, a single point of light flashed, a camera lens. Our new target was acquired. That kiss was a line drawn in the sand. The photograph, taken from the dark warehouse across the water, was the proof that someone had seen me cross it. 2 days later, the Riverton Tatler, a gossip rag fit only for lining bird cages, had my face on the front page. The grainy telephoto shot of Luca and me on the platform was splashed next to a staged photo of me at the library circulation desk, looking bewildered. The headline was cruel and mocking. Librarian in the lion's den, Verano's new advisor. It was meant to be a joke. Cataneo was paying for it. Luca's team, moving with quiet efficiency, traced the digital ad buys to a shell company. Thousands of automated bots, algorithm-driven ghosts, began to push the narrative online. Verano is so desperate he is taking advice from a temp. What is she advising him on? The Dewey Decimal System. Heard she spilled some champagne and got a promotion. They were neutralizing me. They had tried fear, and I had not run. Now they were trying ridicule, painting me as a fool, and by extension, painting Luca as weak for listening to me. They are making you a circus act, Luca said, his voice clipped. We were in the port's command center, a glass box overlooking the harbor, filled with the quiet hum of servers and high-definition screens. If you are a joke, your open port night becomes a joke, a distraction, not a symbol of community trust. As if to punctuate his words, a new threat arrived. This one was not slid under my door. It was delivered by a professional bike messenger to the library's front desk, in an envelope so official it scared my shift supervisor. Another summons. This time, the Federal Commerce Integrity Bureau was compelling my testimony. It demanded my presence at the Port District Adjudication Office tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock. I did not even react. I just drove the summons to the port and handed it to Ari Santoro. Ari, in her severe black suit, did not waste time reading the dense legal threats. She looked only at the address listed at the bottom, 4501 Briar Ridge. "There is no adjudication office in Briar Ridge," Ari said, her voice devoid of emotion. 4501 is a derelict warehouse complex. It has been structurally unsound for 5 years. This is not a summons. Nadia, this is a kidnapping invitation. A cold dread, sharper and more acidic than before, settled in my stomach. The joke in the papers was the public offense. This was the private one. They were trying to lure me into a trap. That evening, Don Salvatore summoned me, not to his home, but to Luca's office. The old Don was sitting behind the massive mahogany desk, a place he seldom occupied. He looked like a king holding court in his son's throne room. Luca stood by the window, staring into the darkness, his posture rigid. Don Salvatore pushed a worn, leather-bound document across the desk's polished surface. "This," he said, his voice a low gravel, "is our history, our legitimacy." I opened the folder carefully. The paper was heavy, almost like cloth, yellowed with age. It was a letter, the handwriting an elegant, faded script. It was dated 1953. It was from the sitting governor of the state to Luca's grandfather, Antonio Verano. It explicitly granted the Verano family primary rights of maritime movement in Raven Gate, thanking them personally for stabilizing the commercial corridor during the violent strikes of that era. "It is a relic," Luca said from the window, his voice a low rumble, "but it is a legally binding one. It predates the current Port Authority. If Cataneo continues to push this federal nonsense, my father will release this to the press. It is a reminder to the city that we were here long before them, and that we have the state's blessing to operate." It was a warning shot, a piece of paper that held more true power than all of Cataneo's fabricated bureaus. "But it is a defensive move, right?" I said, looking up from the letter. My librarian instincts were firing. "We are still letting them set the terms. We need to find out who the FCIB really is, who is building their ghosts." Luca raised an eyebrow. "Ari says they are ghosts, fabricated." "Ghosts have to be made." "Luca," I insisted. "The summons. They sent the file as a PDF to the messenger service. I had the service forward it to me. I had been working on this all afternoon. I am a librarian. I look at metadata. The author field on that PDF was scrubbed, but the creator program was specific. It is a proprietary software suite, very expensive, used by only one data analytics firm in this city." I turned my laptop around on the desk, showing them the search page I had prepared. "Viridian Quanta," I read, "a data firm. They specialize in bespoke corporate solutions and opposition research. They build data profiles, they mine digital security, and they create bespoke shell corporations. They are the ones building the FCIB and the BPS for Cataneo." I had found the factory. Luca's expression, dark and calculating, turned predatory. "Viridian Quanta." He picked up his phone, his thumb moving fast. "They are not just fighting a PR war. They are committing systemic, prosecutable fraud." He made a call, not to a lawyer, but to someone else. "It is time," he said into the phone, his voice low and commanding. "Activate the compact." He hung up and looked at me. "The Free Dock Compact. My father funded it years ago. It is a network of every small business owner at this port. The tugboat captains, the independent haulers, the customs brokers, the diner owners. Cataneo has been squeezing them for months with new regulations and fines from these same fake bureaus. They have been waiting for a reason to fight back. The PR war was about to meet a ground force. But we still had a problem. Viridian Quanta was the factory. But we needed the shipping manifest. We needed proof they were building these weapons specifically for Cataneo. We needed an insider. Milo Crest, Ari said, stepping forward from the shadows. She'd been silent until now. He's a junior accountant at Cataneo. He reached out to our confidential tip line 2 days ago. He's terrified. He says Cataneo is using Viridian Quanta's data to blackmail suppliers, and he is the one processing the payments. He thinks they are setting him up to take the fall. Where is he? Luca asked. In hiding. He refuses to move. He refuses to talk on the phone. He will only meet in person. He wants safe passage out of the city in exchange for the hard drives. The plan crystallized in that moment. It was 2-layered. Layer 1. The open port night. This was our public shield, our distraction. We would draw every media outlet in the city to the harbor. We would use the Free Dock Compact to spread the word to every neighborhood, making it a massive civic event, too big to be ignored and too public to be attacked. Layer 2, the secret mission, while the entire city, and presumably Cataneo's security, was watching the stage. Ari and Luca would retrieve Milo Crest from his hiding spot. My role was Layer 1. I was the face, the librarian advisor. Cataneo wanted to make me a joke. I would be the master of ceremonies. The night before the event, the air at the port was electric. The organized chaos was beautiful. The string lights were hung between the massive cranes, glowing like a captured galaxy. The vendors were setting up. I saw a stall hanging strings of fresh cannoli right next to a bright red food truck selling Vietnamese pho, Riverton's cultures, colliding beautifully. The air smelled of sea salt, diesel, sweet pastry, and lemongrass. Don Salvatore walked with me through the yard. He was watching the setup with a quiet, appraising eye. "You have brought Little Italy back to the docks. Nadia," he said, his voice laced with something like nostalgia. "And you have brought the rest of Riverton with it." "They need to see you tomorrow, Signore," I said, holding my clipboard, which felt like a shield. "Not just Luca. They need to see the history." I prepared a small introduction, in Italian. He looked skeptical. The city does not speak the old tongue. "They will understand the respect." I took a breath. I rehearsed the line I had practiced, the formal greeting, followed by a short, classical quote I had found in Amelia's old books, a line about how a community's foundation is built on shared honor. Don Salvatore was silent for a long moment. He looked at me, really looked at me, and his eyes were soft. "Amelia," he said, his voice thick, "would have been so proud of you. Tomorrow. You are not just a librarian. You are the voice of this port." We were ready. The stage was set. The food was ready. The Compact members were arriving in droves to volunteer as security. Then, at 10 o'clock that night, my phone buzzed with a text. It was Ari. "We have a problem," she wrote. I met her and Luca at the command center. Ari had a map up on the main screen, a blinking red dot that had frozen over an industrial park in Briar Ridge. "Milo Crest," she said, no preamble. "He was using a burner phone with a tracker, set to ping our server every 5 minutes. The ping stopped 20 minutes ago." "Did he run?" Luca demanded, slamming his hand on the console. "No." Ari zoomed in on the map. The red dot was frozen over a single address. The ping stopped, and the phone was powered down, but this was its last known location. She pointed to the address on the screen, 4501. "It is the same address," I whispered, the blood draining from my face. "The warehouse, the one from my summons." "They did not get you," Luca said, his voice a deadly quiet. It was not a trap for me. I realized, the cold dread returning. It was a trap for him. They must have known he was talking. Ari shook her head, her eyes hard as granite. The neighbors reported men in uniforms, not the FCIB this time. They said the badges read BPS, the Bureau of Port Standards. They had used their other ghost agency to snatch him. The one piece of evidence we needed was gone. "I am going with you." The words were out of my mouth before I had time to think. Luca and Ari stopped their rapid, tactical planning and stared at me. "No," Luca said. It was not a suggestion. It was a command. You are the face of the event. You are staying here, where it is safe. They used my summons. Luca, I insisted, stepping forward. The command center felt small, the air too thick. The address on my fake summons. They did not just happen to pick that warehouse. It was a message. They were luring me. When I did not show, they took Milo. This is my fault. It is not your fault, Ari said, her voice flat, but it is your problem. He's right, though. It is a hostile extraction. You are not trained. You are trained to fight, I argued, my heart hammering. You are not trained to de-escalate. Milo is not a soldier. He's an accountant. He is terrified. He already thinks Verano is the mob. He's not going to trust two people in tactical gear kicking down the door, but he might trust me. I looked at Luca. I am the librarian. I am the one he saw in the papers. I am the one who is not a threat. Luca stared at me for a long, heavy silence. He was calculating, weighing the risk. He saw the resolve in my eyes. He was a man who respected strength, and he was just beginning to see mine was not physical. Fine, he said. His voice clipped. He ripped a small black earpiece from a console and shoved it into my hand. But you are not Nadia Quill. You are Nightingale. You do not speak. You do not move. You do not breathe unless Ari tells you to. You stay behind me, and you do exactly as I say. This is not a debate. If you hesitate, you will get us all killed. Am I clear? Crystal, I said, my hand closing around the earpiece. The ride to Briar Ridge was silent. We were in the armored sedan, a black ghost moving through the sleeping industrial parks. Lot 47 was a massive, rotting warehouse, a tin can of rust and shadows. Ari, crouched at the corner of the building, used a thermal imager. 2 at the main loading bay, 4, maybe 5, inside. Prefab office, center floor. They are amateurs. Sloppy. They are carrying sidearms, but they are holding them like they are afraid of them. They are not soldiers, Luca said, pulling a heavy tool from a bag. They are Viridian Quanta's IT department, playing dress-up. He moved to a large utility junction box on the side of the building. So let's give the Bureau of Port Standards a standards inspection. With a single, violent wrench, he ripped the main breaker. The entire block plunged into darkness. A second later, a diesel generator coughed to life, and the warehouse interior lit up, not with white light, but with the pulsing, disorienting throb of red emergency lights. They have to maintain the illusion of a federal building, Luca whispered, a grim smile in the flashing red light. Fire code. We did not go in the main door. Ari led us to a side panel, which she opened with terrifying, silent efficiency. The 2 guards at the main entrance were distracted, yelling at each other about the lights. Ari moved like smoke. I did not see the strikes. I only saw the 2 men slump to the ground, unconscious. She signaled, "Clear." We moved inside. The warehouse was a cavern of machinery and shadows, the world pulsing red, red, red. I could hear shouting from the office in the center. "Where are the drives? Milo, just tell us where they are." "I do not know." Milo's voice was a terrified shriek. "The BPS said this was a maritime audit. I brought my ledgers. I do not know anything about any drives." Ari took the door. Luca was behind her. I was behind him, my heart feeling like a hummingbird trapped in my throat. Ari did not knock. She hit the door with her shoulder, and it exploded inward. Luca was a blur. He moved through the red-lit chaos, a controlled storm. I saw 2 men go down before they even knew what hit them. The third tried to draw his weapon. Ari's arm snaked out, and he folded. I did not watch. I skirted the fight, my eyes locked on the corner of the room. Milo was huddled under a metal desk, his hands over his head, whimpering. "Milo," I yelled. He flinched. He was too terrified. I knelt, ignoring the sounds of the fight behind me. I grabbed his arm. He looked at me, his eyes wide with uncomprehending terror. I used the only weapon I had, Mrs. Pavesi's voice. I spoke in clear, calm, Florentine Italian. "Milo, mi chiamo Nadia. Non siamo qui per farti del male. Siamo con Verano. Siamo qui per portarti in salvo. My name is Nadia. We are not here to hurt you. We are with Verano. We are here to get you to safety." He stopped shaking. He stared at me, the librarian from the newspaper. "Why?" he whispered in English, his voice cracking. They said you were a target." "I am," I said, pulling him to his feet. "We both are. Viridian Quanta. They are using illegally collected data to blackmail the entire port. Are not they—" Milo nodded, tears streaming down his face. "They are ghosting the federal system. They were going to plant the drives on me, make me the fall guy." The whoop, whoop, whoop of a full security alarm cut through the air. One of the goons, now unconscious, must have hit a panic button. "Time to go," Luca yelled. The fight was over. Ari was already dragging a stunned Milo toward a side exit. We heard the heavy tread of boots from the main loading bay. Reinforcements. "Side stairs!" Ari yelled, pointing to a metal staircase that led down to a lower-level exit. "They will cut us off." Luca pulled a small cylinder from his belt, ready to throw it. Smoke. "Wait!" I shouted. I had seen it in the office. On the desk, a public address microphone. "Trust me." Luca looked at me, his face a mask in the red light. The sound of boots was getting closer. He hesitated for a fraction of a second. He nodded. Once. I grabbed the microphone, my hand shaking, and pressed the talk button. I took a deep breath. I did not yell. I became every bored, annoyed, underpaid administrator I had ever heard. I pitched my voice low, bureaucratic. "This is Control," I said, my voice booming through the entire warehouse, echoing off the steel. "We have a confirmed sensor fault at Loading Bay 3 due to the fire test. All security units. Please proceed immediately to Bay 3 for a manual system reset. Acknowledge." There was a half-second of silence. The running boots stopped. A crackle from a walkie-talkie on the floor. Control, we acknowledge. We are proceeding to Bay 3. The boots changed direction, running away from us toward the opposite side of the warehouse. I dropped the mic. I looked at Luca. In the pulsing red light, his eyes were wide with something I'd never seen before. "Nightingale," Ari's voice hissed from the stairwell. "Now." We ran. We clattered down the metal stairs, the alarm screaming in our ears. The steps were steep, slick with grime. I was moving too fast, fueled by adrenaline. My foot slipped. I did not fall. Luca was right behind me. In less than a heartbeat, an arm like a steel cable wrapped around my waist, yanking me back against his chest. Time stopped. The alarm faded. All I could feel was the solid wall of his body, his breath hot on my ear. I was flush against him, my back to his front. I could feel his heart hammering against my spine, a rhythm that matched my own. He held me there for that single, stolen second. "I have you." Then he leaned closer, his lips brushing my ear. He spoke in a soft, low whisper, and his Italian was perfect, formal, and devastatingly precise. "Grazie, mia coraggiosa bibliotecaria." Thank you, my courageous librarian. He set me back on my feet. "Go!" We burst out into the cool night air and piled into the sedan. Ari was in the driver's seat and had the car moving before my door was even shut. Milo was in the back with me, shaking so hard his teeth chattered. He fumbled inside his cheap blazer. He pulled out a small, brushed steel hard drive. "It is all of it, everything, the encrypted contracts from Viridian Quanta, the payment invoices, the audio files of them planning the BPS and FCIB. It is all there." He did not hand it to Luca. He pushed it into my hand. I closed my fist around it. It was cold and heavy. Luca was watching me from the passenger seat, his reflection a ghost in the dark window. The adrenaline was fading, leaving a vibrating, electric hum between us. "Tomorrow night," he said, his voice quiet but filled with a new intensity. "Cataneo will be at the event. They will try to stop you. But you did this. Nadia, you got this." He nodded at the drive in my hand. "That stage is yours. Tomorrow night is yours." The trust in his gaze was absolute. It was heavier than the hard drive. We pulled into the container yard, now a sea of string lights and quiet tents. As we stepped out of the car, a high-pitched buzzing sound filled the air. "Drone," Ari snapped, her head tilting up. It hovered about 20 feet above us, a single red eye blinking. A small screen mounted beneath it flickered to life, illuminating us in a harsh, white glare. A woman's face appeared. She had high, sharp cheekbones, dark hair pulled back in a severe knot, and lipstick the color of drying blood. Her smile was a condescending, chilling sneer. "Bianca Cataneo." Her voice, synthesized and tinny, cut through the quiet of the port. "Having fun in Briar Ridge. Luca, I do hope your librarian is ready for her big debut. It is going to be memorable." The screen went black. The drone shot straight up into the night sky and vanished. Bianca's drone vanished. The red light blinked out, and the high-pitched whine faded, leaving a silence that felt heavier and more threatening than the alarms in the warehouse. Ari Santoro stepped out of the sedan, her face an impassive mask. She had Milo Crest by the arm. The man was still shaking. "I am taking the asset to the primary safe house," Ari said, her voice cutting through the night air. "He's not secure here. You two." She looked at Luca, then at me. "Go upstairs. Get off the ground floor, now." Luca did not argue. He did not look at the sky. He took my elbow, his grip firm but not painful, and steered me toward a heavy steel door I had not noticed, set into the base of the main Vex Maritime warehouse. It opened to a small, private industrial elevator. We ascended in silence. The adrenaline from the rescue, from the confrontation on the stairs, was beginning to drain away, leaving an electric, vibrating hum under my skin. My hands were shaking. The elevator opened not into an office, but into the center of a glass box. It was a command center, perched on the roof of the massive warehouse, offering a 360-degree view of Riverton. The city was a galaxy of light spilled across the dark hills. The room itself was sparse, a long, black leather couch, a minimalist desk, and the faint hum of high-end electronics. Luca walked to the window, his back to me. He stared out at the glittering skyline, his shoulders rigid. "She knew," he said, his voice a low rasp. "Bianca, she knew where Milo was. She knew we were going. She let us take him." I wrapped my arms around myself, rubbing the chill from my skin. "It was a test," I whispered, "to see what we would do. It was a message." He turned from the glass, and the mask of the Dawn, the cold commander I had seen in the warehouse, was gone. In the dim light of the city, he just looked tired, exhausted. "This," he jested, a sweep of his hand encompassing the port below, the city beyond. "This power, it is a spotlight. I see everyone, and everyone sees me, but I am always standing alone in the dark, right outside the beam." He met my eyes, and his honesty was a physical force. "I am surrounded by my own men who would die for me, and I have never felt more isolated. They obey me. They fear me." He paused, his jaw tight. "But no one talks to me, not like you did tonight. No one has ever used their voice to protect me." My heart ached. This man, who controlled a maritime empire, who commanded loyalty and terror, was profoundly alone. "I understand that," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "My whole life. I have been the one holding things together. My job at the library, my interpreting classes. I was the one who managed Mrs. Pavesi's medications. I learned to be strong because I had to be. I am the backup. I am my backup. There was never anyone else." I looked down at my hands, still smeared with the grime from the metal staircase. "Relying on you, on Ari, running into that warehouse tonight, that was the hardest thing I have ever done, letting someone else be strong for me." He moved slowly, deliberately. He stopped directly in front of me, so close I could feel the heat radiating from his body, the residual energy of the fight. He did not reach for me, not to grab or hold or demand. He lifted his hand, and with the back of his fingers, he touched my cheek. It was the lightest touch I had ever felt, a question. His skin was rough, calloused from work I could not imagine, but impossibly warm against my cold face. His thumb grazed the sharp line of my cheekbone. He was not taking, he was asking. I leaned into the touch, a fractional movement. I nodded, my throat tight. The fear, the adrenaline, the sudden, aching loneliness, it all coalesced into a single, sharp point of clarity. I lifted my own hand, not to his face, but to the collar of his dark shirt. My fingers brushed the warm skin of his neck. I fisted the fabric, and I pulled him down to me. The kiss was not like the first one on the platform, which had been tentative and surprising. This was a realization. It was slow and deep and agonizingly gentle. It was a complete surrender and a total claim, all at once. His other hand came up, his fingers sliding into my hair, his palm cradling the back of my head, holding me as if I were made of glass. My lips parted under his, and it was not a kiss of simple passion. It was a kiss of understanding. It tasted of the night air, of adrenaline, of safety. I heard a sound, a low groan deep in his chest, and I realized my own heart was hammering so loud it felt audible in the silent room. We broke apart, but only barely. Our foreheads rested together. His breath was hot on my lips. "Nadia," he whispered, the name a prayer, a question. "Dio mio," I breathed back, the Italian slipping out, the language of Amelia, the language of comfort. He kissed me again, slower this time, a deep, searching pressure. "Tell me you are okay," he whispered in English against my mouth. "Sto bene," I whispered back. "I am fine." He pulled me flush against him. This was not the brief, desperate clutch on the stairs, an anchor in a moment of panic. This was an embrace. His arms wrapped around me, one hand splayed flat and warm against the small of my back. He held me. He just held me. And for the first time in my entire adult life, I was not holding myself up. I was not the strong one. See, I was not the backup. I was just held. I buried my face in the curve of his neck, breathing him in, the smell I'd noticed at the gala, cedarwood, and the night sea, the sharp, clean scent of the open ocean. It was the scent of him. We did not speak for a long time. He led me to the long leather couch, and we sat, half-curled, facing the city. He did not release me. He kept an arm around my shoulders, and my hand found his, our fingers lacing together on the cushion between us. The hard drive sat on the desk, a cold piece of steel, the only other thing in the room. "She is gonna burn it all down," I said quietly, looking at the lights of Bianca's territory across the water. "Let her try," he said, his voice vibrating against my ear. "Tomorrow, at the event, you give them the truth. You give them Milo's drive." He looked down at our joined hands. "When this is over, what will you do?" "Nadia, go back to the library, back to the silence." "The library is my home," I admitted, "but it is not just about the books. It is about the people, the workers, the ones who come in at night, their hands rough, trying to learn English so they can get a better shift. The ones who need help reading contracts they do not understand." I turned to look at him. My dream. It is a library at the port, open all night, a place for the dock workers, the haulers, classes in English, in Italian, in sign language, a place of knowledge right here, in the middle of all this. Steel. He was quiet for a long moment, his thumb rubbing the back of my hand. "My grandfather," he said, his voice soft, "believed this port was the heart of the city. My father protected it with blood. I tried to protect it with legitimacy, with armor." He looked at me, a small, genuine smile transforming his hard features. "You are the first person who suggested protecting it with books." He squeezed my hand. "A nonviolent port, a library for the workers. It is a good dream." The air in the glass box was thick with unspoken things. The kiss had unlocked something deep, a raw anticipation, but he just held my hand tighter. He traced the lines on my palm. We had stepped over one line tonight, but there was another one, and we both knew it. He respected it. He honored the space. We sat in the quiet, watching the city breathe, our heartbeats the only sound. It was a beautiful, fragile boundary, this quiet, shared moment of waiting. Finally, the sky began to bleed from black to a deep, bruised purple in the east. The event was in less than 12 hours. "You need to rest," he said. He stood, pulling me gently to my feet. At the elevator, he paused. The tension of the coming day, of Bianca's threat, settled back onto his shoulders. He cupped my face again, his gaze intense, searching. "Sei al sicuro con me?" he said, his voice a low vow. "You are safe with me." I looked straight into his eyes, the eyes of the dawn, the man of armor, the lonely man who dreamt of libraries. I put my hand over his, pressing his palm flat against my cheek. "Solo se mi ascolti," I replied, "only if you listen to me." A flicker of surprise, then a deep, slow understanding. He nodded, a single, deliberate movement. This was not a bargain. It was an agreement. I was not the damsel he was protecting. He was not the brute I was taming. We were allies, and tomorrow we were going to war. The morning of the open port night, the air smelled of salt, diesel, and sweet cannoli. The entire yard was a hive of hopeful activity. Then, at 9 o'clock, Bianca Cataneo fired her first shot. It was not a bullet. It was a news alert that lit up my phone, and every phone in the city. The Riverton Tatler had been replaced by a much more legitimate-looking outlet, the Riverton Digital Beacon. The headline was devastating. FCIB probe confirms Vera Maritime in violation Verano found using illegal labor. It was a lie, crafted from whole cloth by Viridian Quanta. Luca was thunderous. He was in the command center, slamming his fist on the console. "Get our lawyers now," he snarled. We sue them into dust." "No," I said, my voice quiet but firm. "A lawsuit takes months. It happens in the dark. She wants you to fight in the dark. We have to fight in the light." I had not slept. After leaving Luca, I had made a call to a pro bono lawyer I knew from my library shifts, a quiet man named Marcus, who ran a small, fictional organization called the Lighthouse Fund, dedicated to helping port workers. For the past 2 hours, we had been preparing our own offensive. It was not a legal threat. It was a transparency packet. I hit send. We emailed it to every real journalist in Riverton, including the one who just published Bianca's lie. Our packet was simple. Vera Maritime's complete, anonymized payroll, the union contract, specifically Section 5, Paragraph 2, outlining their hiring practices, the company's multi-million-dollar health insurance premium payment for every single employee. Hard, verifiable facts. "We do not deny," I told Luca, my fingers shaking slightly from the coffee. "We overwhelm. We fight her fiction with so much truth, it smothers her." Luca looked at the packet I had sent, then at me. "She is playing politics." "And you are a boss," I said. "But today you have to be a politician." He hated it, but he nodded. Just before the gates opened, Don Salvatore arrived. He did not come to the command center. He walked the grounds, inspecting the food trucks, nodding to the jazz trio. Luca met him by the stage, his body tense, a small arsenal hidden beneath his tailored jacket. "You are wound too tight, my son," Don Salvatore said, adjusting his cuff. "Bianca is playing games. She's leaking lies. She will have men here," Luca said, his voice a low growl. "I have Ari's team everywhere. We are ready for a fight." Don Salvatore looked at the stage, at the thousands of string lights, at the families already lining up outside the gate. "You are ready for your fight, Luca. You have armored this port with steel. But Bianca is not attacking the steel. She is attacking our name." He turned, his gaze finding me as I stood nearby, holding my clipboard like a shield. "Your armor cannot stop a lie, but she can." Luca looked from his father to me, his confusion warring with his protective instincts. "Padre, she is the primary target. I need to keep her off that stage, not put her on it." "No," Don Salvatore said, his voice firm. "Tonight, she is the shield. You will stand with her, but you will let her speak. You speak the language of power, of commands. She speaks the language of the community, of trust. Let her use it." Luca's eyes met mine. The memory of the night before, only if you listened to me, was a silent, vibrating chord between us. He gave a single, sharp nod. The stage was mine. At 6 o'clock, the gates opened, the city flooded in. It was not the silk and steel crowd from the gala. This was Riverton. Dock workers, families, artists, children, thousands of them. The atmosphere was electric, a celebration. Bianca's second move came an hour later. The string quartet I had booked, a nice, safe choice, suddenly had 4 flat tires. They were stuck on the highway. A text from Ari, who was moving through the crowd like a ghost, confirmed it. Sabotage, clean cuts, no witnesses. Before I could panic, a new band showed up. Claiming to be the replacement, it was a screeching heavy metal band, their amplifiers large enough to rattle the fillings from your teeth. Bianca's idea of a party. No power. Ari's voice came through my earpiece, calm and cold. She had already reached the junction box. Faulty wiring, a fire hazard, denied. But Ari, it turned out, had a backup for the backup. She had anticipated this. "I made a call," she whispered to me. A moment later, a true Riverton Street jazz band, 3 old men and a woman with a saxophone, walked onto the stage. They had not been on any list. Ari had apparently just pulled them from a street corner. They started to play, and the crowd roared. They were brilliant. Ari had not just countered Bianca's move, she had improved on mine. The main event came at 8. The sun was down. The port was a sea of light. I stepped to the microphone, my heart a hammer against my ribs. "Good evening, Riverton," my voice echoed, surprisingly steady. "Welcome to your port." That was when they moved. Not Verano's men. A group of 8 men, moving from the edge of the crowd in crisp, dark blue uniforms, BPS patches on their shoulders. They were not the sloppy goons from the warehouse. These men were hard, their faces set, moving with purpose. They were heading for the steps to the stage. Luca tensed beside me, his hand moving under his jacket. Ari's voice was in my ear. "Team is moving. Do not engage, Nadia." But they were not engaging me. They were engaging the stage. They were here to shut me down. "Wait," I said to Luca. I stepped forward into the full glare of the spotlights. "Excuse me, gentlemen," I called out. My voice amplified, boomed over the crowd. The jazz music faded. Every eye turned to the men in blue. They stopped, momentarily blinded by the light. The leader, a man with a square jaw, shielded his eyes. "Ma'am, this is an official inspection by the Bureau of Port Standards. This event is unauthorized. We are shutting it down." "Of course," I said, my voice smooth, polite, dangerously professional. "The librarian at your service. We are so glad you could make it. We are all about standards here. Before we comply, just for the record, could you please cite the specific maritime law you are enforcing?" The man went blank. "Ma'am?" "The law," I repeated, as if helping a confused patron. "Is it the Maritime Commerce Act of 1984? I believe you are referring to Title 19, Section 503. Or perhaps it is a local ordinance. I would hate for us to be in violation of the wrong statute." The man stared at me. He was an actor. He knew his line shut it down, but he did not know the script. The crowd was murmuring. We have orders, ma'am." "Whose orders?" I pressed, my voice still light, still helpful, because Title 19 is for container manifests, not public gatherings. You must mean Title 33, navigation, but that does not apply on dry dock. So, please, enlighten us." He had nothing. He was a fraud, exposed by a librarian and a few facts. He opened his mouth, but no sound came out. At that exact, perfect moment of silence, Don Salvatore Verano walked onto the stage. He did not hurry. He moved with the slow, inevitable gravity of a lifetime of command. He came to stand beside me, not looking at the fake agents, but at the crowd. The agents looked at him, and the color drained from their faces. I turned my back on them. I dismissed them. I faced Don Salvatore. In the ringing silence, I gave him the formal, respectful bow Amelia had taught me. I spoke, my voice clear and strong, the classical Italian rolling off my tongue. Illustre Signore Verano, benvenuto nel Porto del Popolo. Illustrious Sir, welcome to the People's Port. Then I turned, just slightly, to look out over the sea of faces, to the darkness where Bianca was surely watching. I added the line I had saved, the line from Dante. La fiamma c'è viva, I declared, my voice ringing with a power I had never known. Non teme il vento. The living flame fears not the wind. Dead silence. The city held its breath. Then a single old man in the front row, wearing a Verano maritime cap, began to clap. Then another. Then the entire yard. Thousands of people erupted in a deafening wave of applause. The BPS agents did not walk away. They dissolved back into the crowd, humiliated. The image, I would learn, was already going viral, the librarian in a simple black dress, the old Don at her side, silencing federal imposters with nothing but words. But we were not done. As the applause began to fade, the massive screens above the stage, which had been showing my face, flickered. A new feed appeared. It was Milo Crest from Aries' safe house. He was terrified, but he was resolved. My name is Milo Crest, he said, his voice shaking. I was a junior accountant for the Cataneo Combine. He did not just talk, he showed them. The screen split, showing his face and the contents of the hard drive. Invoices, contracts signed by Bianca Cataneo, payments to Viridian Quanta, the line item FCIB BPS Regulatory, Shell Creation and Maintenance. And then the audio file, Bianca's voice, cold and precise. Make it look federal. I want Verano buried in paper. I want his sponsors gone. His port choked. The crowd was silent, absorbing the raw, undeniable proof. The lie was dead. The truth was out. I stepped off the stage, my knees weak. Luca was waiting at the bottom of the steps. He did not kiss me. He did not even touch me. He just looked at me, his eyes burning with a fierce pride that was more intimate than any embrace. Ari pushed it through the crowd, her face grim. A message, she said, for you. She handed her phone to Luca. It was a text from an unknown number, a single, brutal message. Midnight, Water Warehouse 9. Just you and me. One time. End this. The cheers from the open port night were still a dull roar in the distance as we stood in the command center. The elation from the stage felt 1,000 miles away. Bianca's text message hung in the air, a drop of poison. Just you and me. Luca's face was stone. He turned to Ari, his voice stripped of all emotion. Get her to the safe house, the one you used for Milo, now. No, I said. He looked at me as if I had lost my mind. Nadia, this is not a discussion. You did your part. It was magnificent, but this is over. The professionals will finish it. She said you and me. Luca, but she is wrong, I insisted, my voice shaking but firm. This whole time, the summons, the photograph, the men at my door, it was never about you. It was about me. I am the string. Remember the one they pull to see if the monster flinches. I am the bait. Which is precisely why you will be 50 miles away when I meet her, he bit out. And what happens then? I challenged him, stepping closer. What happens when she shows up and I am not there? She disappears. This whole thing continues. The ghost bureaus, the lies, the threats. She's angry. She just got publicly humiliated. She's not thinking straight. This is our only chance to end it. I put my hand on his arm, my fingers gripping his jacket. I am the bait. Luca, you cannot stop her from using me that way, but you can let me choose how the trap is set. He stared at me, his jaw working. The protector, the Don, and the man who had listened to me in the glass room were at war with each other. I will not, he said, his voice a low growl, serve you to her on a platter. You will not, I agreed. I will be wearing a wire. Ari will be running the spectrum. and Bianca will be walking into our trap, not the other way around. Don Salvatore, who had joined us, stepped out of the shadows. He had been listening, his ancient eyes moving between us. She is right, Luca. This is no longer a battle of knives. It is a battle of legitimacy. Bianca has shown her hand. Now, we must make her show it to the world. The plan was set with a cold, terrifying speed. Midnight, less than 2 hours. I was fitted with a micro earpiece, smaller than the one from the warehouse, and a directional microphone wired into the collar of my dress. Ari would be in a signals van, a plain black utility van, parked a 1/4 mile away. She would be controlling the spectrum, as she put it, jamming Bianca's comms, listening to mine, and, most importantly, recording. Don Salvatore would not be on the ground. "This is not my fight," he said, his eyes on his son. But he would be close. His private yacht, the Aurelia Mare, a sleek, dark-hulled vessel that looked more like a predator than a pleasure craft, would be idling just outside the harbor mouth. Engines warm, loaded with Verano's fastest security boats, the reserves. Luca and I would go in alone. Water Warehouse 9 was at the dead end of the old port. It was a rotting cathedral of corrugated steel and broken glass, smelling of rust, dead fish, and the thick, briny mud of the low tide. The only light came from a few high-pressure sodium lamps, casting a sick, yellow-orange glow over the wet asphalt. Bianca was waiting in the exact center of the vast, empty space, standing directly under a single, buzzing, bare bulb. She was alone. She wore an immaculate white coat, tailored like a suit, her dark hair pulled back, her red lipstick a slash in the gloom. She was smiling. "The librarian," she said, her voice echoing in the cavernous warehouse. "And the Don. How perfectly domestic." Luca stood slightly in front of me, his body a solid shield. "You wanted a meeting, Bianca. Here we are." "Yes, I did." She gestured elegantly to 2 rusted metal chairs. "Sit. Let's be civilized. This does not have to be difficult." We did not sit. "This is my offer," Bianca said, walking a slow, lazy circle around us, her heels clicking on the concrete. "It is very simple. You, Luca, walk away from Raven Gate. You cede all new shipping contracts. You keep your insurance business, your father's old-world nonsense, whatever. But the port, the shipping, is mine. And in return," Luca's voice was dangerously quiet. "In return," Bianca stopped, her cold gaze fixing on me. "My agencies, the FCIB, the BPS lose interest in your operations. Their investigations conclude, and your librarian," she goes back to her books. "No more summons, no more photos, no more men at her door. She gets to live her quiet little life." The threat, delivered like a gift. My blood ran cold, but I held my ground. "You mean your fake agencies," I said, my voice clear. Bianca's smile widened. "Fake real, what is the difference? Nadia, they have badges. They have official letterhead. That is all power is. A good printer and a little imagination." I looked her dead in the eye. "I have a question. All this effort, all this fraud, where is the real Federal Commerce Integrity Bureau? The real one. Did you ever even look for them?" Bianca stopped, then she laughed. It was not a warm sound. It was sharp and cold, like breaking glass. "Oh, you sweet, naive child." She stepped closer, her perfume all sharp edges. "The real FCIB, the real BPS. They are in the imagination of every shipping clerk and politician who needs a badge of power to hide behind. They are nowhere. They are everywhere. I did not invent the ghost. Librarian. I just gave it a name and put it on my payroll." "So that is your deal," Luca said. "Intimidation and lies." "It is the future," Bianca countered. "Your father's way is over. Blood and honor. It is quaint. This is a war of data, of perception. And I am winning." She looked at me. "Your performance tonight was impressive. Truly. Milo's little confession, very dramatic, but he is a discredited, terrified employee. It is his word against a federal bureau, in court. Who do you think they will believe?" She straightened her white coat, the picture of executive power. So, Luca, the port, or the girl? Your choice. Luca did not hesitate for a second. I choose neither. Bianca sighed, a theatrical gesture of disappointment. I was afraid you would say that. She raised her left hand, a simple, elegant signal. With a sound like a freight train, the massive rolling doors of the warehouse slammed shut, plunging us into near darkness. The single bulb above her head the only light. From the gantries above, from behind stacks of rotting pallets, her BPS agents emerged, not 2, not 8, at least 20. They were not the sloppy ones from Briar Ridge. These men were hard, dressed in black tactical gear, and they all had weapons drawn, leveled at us. You see, Bianca said, her voice dripping with triumph, you get neither. I get both. She nodded to the team leader. Take her, gently. 2 men moved toward me. Luca shifted, his hand moving under his jacket. Ari, now. Luca's whisper was so low I barely heard it. On it, Ari's voice crackled in my ear. A blinding, deafening flash. Every single blinding white floodlight in the warehouse, the ones used for loading ships, blasted on at once. It was like daylight had exploded. Bianca and her team cried out, hands flying to their faces, momentarily blind. Showtime, Ari's voice said in my ear. On the high warehouse walls, the massive digital screens that usually showed cargo manifests flared to life. They were showing us, and them, live. The feed was being piped directly from the warehouse security cameras, and from the small, high-definition drones Ari had planted hours before. The feed was also being broadcast back to the open port night, where thousands of people were still mingling, watching what they thought was the end of the show. They were now watching Bianca Cataneo's federal agents, their guns drawn, surrounding an unarmed librarian and the Verano boss. You, Bianca shrieked, her face contorted, realizing the trap. Cut the feed, cut it. But her men were fumbling with radios, their comms dead, jammed by Ari's signal blast. Bianca Cataneo, a new voice, deep, amplified. It boomed through the warehouse like the voice of God. Don Salvatore Verano stood on a gantry above the main door, flanked by 10 of his own men. He held a microphone. This port does not belong to thieves who wrap themselves in fake flags. He pointed down at the crowd, now visible on the screens, watching this all unfold. It belongs to the workers. It belongs to Riverton. Reserves, Bianca screamed, her face a mask of pure fury, all pretense of civility gone. Now kill the feed, kill them all. A new set of doors opened, and a dozen more men, her true reserves, poured in. It was chaos. Luca did not hesitate. Wait, he was not a politician anymore. He grabbed me. Go. He shoved me behind him, toward a narrow, dark alley between 2 giant stacks of shipping containers. He moved, not like a businessman, but like a fighter. He intercepted the first 2 BPS agents. It was brutal, fast, and economical. Close quarters combat, a block, a strike, a disarm. He was a storm of focused violence, clearing a path. Ari, he yelled, exit now. South wall rolling door 5, her voice replied. We ran, the sound of shouts and the sickening thud of fists behind us. As we ducked into the container alley, my foot stumbled over something, a radio. One of the BPS agents had dropped his tactical transmitter. I did not stop to think. I scooped it up. It was heavy, complex, a data burst device. It was still connected to their network. Nadia, move, Luca yelled, pulling me. I ran, fumbling with the device. I saw the port. I saw the memory. I saw the send function. My fingers flew. I saw the directory. They were linked to Viridian Quanta's server. I selected a file, a packet of data, anything. And I sent it. Not to Ari, not to Luca. I sent it to the Riverton Beacon, the small, independent news blog that Cataneo did not own, the real journalists. Let them figure it out. We burst through the south wall door, into the night air. The sound of a long, mournful ship horn blast echoed across the water, a fitting end to the battle. "This way!" Ari was there, the armored sedan roaring to life, the door open. We looked back. From the warehouse, Bianca Cataneo was emerging, not beaten, not captured. She was walking calmly, flanked by two of her personal guards, toward the water's edge. She climbed into a waiting, low-profile speedboat, its engines rumbling. She looked across the water at us, a dark silhouette. Even from that distance, I could feel the cold fury of her smile. The boat's engine roared, a high-pitched scream, and it shot off into the darkness, leaving a white wake. My phone in my pocket buzzed, a new text from her. "See you in court, librarian, or underwater." The war was not over. It had just changed. The open port night had detonated in the city's consciousness. The live-streamed feed from Warehouse 9, showing Bianca's BPS agents pulling weapons on an unarmed librarian, was not just news. It was a city-wide scandal. The Riverton Beacon, the small independent blog I had sent the data burst to, had become the epicenter of the story. They analyzed the packet I had sent, revealing it contained the BPS team's internal comms log and their direct links to Viridian Quanta. My phrase, ghost agency, had become the media's favorite term. Viridian Quanta was exposed as a ghost factory, a shadowy corporation that built fake federal bureaus for hire. By 9 o'clock the next morning, the city council, scrambling to distance themselves from Cataneo, announced the formation of a real, or at least semi-real, investigative body, the Urban Transport Integrity Commission, or UTIC, their first and only agenda item, a full, public hearing on the Cataneo Combine and Viridian Quanta. The victory felt distant. The public win was a private nightmare. Luca was in the glass room on the warehouse roof, the rising sun painting the sky in shades of bruised purple, and he was issuing orders. "Ari is moving you," he said, not looking at me, his voice a flat, hard command. "A new safe house, outside the city, 2 men with you, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week." "No." My voice was quiet, but it stopped him cold. He turned, his face a mask of disbelief and exhaustion. "Nadia, this is not a negotiation. She's not a CEO anymore. She's a wounded animal. She lost everything. She will come for you." "I know," I said, walking toward him, "and I will not be in a cage when she does." "It is not a cage," he bit out, his frustration rolling off him. "It is protection." "It is the same thing," I said, while stopping just short of him. "It is a box. It is exactly what she offered me. A quiet life, hidden away. I will not accept it from her, and I will not accept it from you." I met his gaze, my own as unyielding as his. "We agreed, allies. That meant you listened to me. If you try to lock me away, if you silence me for my own good, then this entire thing, you and me, it is over." I saw the war in his eyes. The Don, who commanded and protected, was fighting the man who had asked me to walk with him. The silence stretched, thick and heavy. "I cannot lose you," he whispered. The words so low they were almost a thought. It was the most vulnerable thing he had ever said. "You will not," I said, my voice softening, "but you will lose me if you try to own me." He finally gave a single, sharp nod. "No cage, but Ari does not leave your side. Not by one step. That is my boundary." It was a compromise I could live with. I went back to work. It was the only way to feel normal. The night shift at the library was my sanctuary. The whispers about me, the librarian advisor had reached a fever pitch, but in the deep quiet after midnight, it was just me and the books. At 1:30 in the morning, the heavy oak doors of the main hall opened. I looked up, annoyed, expecting a frantic student. It was Don Salvatore Verano. He looked impossibly out of place, a figure of dark, old-world power standing between the shelves of modern fiction and self-help. He walked silently on the carpeted floor, stopping at my circulation desk. "Signora Verano," I said, my voice hushed. He did not reply immediately. He reached into the inner pocket of his immaculate overcoat and placed a small, leather-bound book on my desk. The leather was cracked and soft with age. I knew it instantly. My hand flew to my mouth. It was Mrs. Pavesi's volume of Dante. I thought this was lost, I whispered. When her apartment was cleaned out, Amelia and I spoke often, in her final years, he said, his voice a low rumble in the stillness. She was a light. She always said this book was for the student with the precise soul. I held on to it. I believe it is time it found its owner. I opened the cover, Amelia's Spidery. Elegant handwriting was on the first page. La fiamma che viva. She was very proud of you. Don Salvatore said he looked around the vast empty library. Luca, my son, he builds fortresses. He thinks in steel and armor. It is his way. He wants to build one for you. He tapped the book with one long finger. Do not let him. You are not made for fortresses. Nadia, you are made of this. He met my gaze, his eyes sharp and knowing. Your path is your own. Do not let him or Bianca choose it for you. He nodded, a gesture of profound, final respect, and was gone, a ghost of the old world leaving me in the silence. His words, and Amelia's book, cemented an idea that had been forming since I stood on the port stage. When I met Luca the next day, I did not talk about Bianca. I did not talk about the hearing. I want to build something, I said. We were at a small, neutral coffee shop with Ari sitting in a booth 10 feet away, watching the door. The Night Docks Library, a permanent one, a retrofitted shipping container, computers, Wi-Fi, books. Luca just listened, his eyes on me. Classes, I continued, my passion growing. For the workers, English as a second language, commercial law basics, sign language, Italian, a place of knowledge, not just cargo, a place that is theirs. He was quiet for a moment. My father's father, he said, built the port with his hands. My father held it with his blood. I tried to hold it with business. And you want to hold it with words. He smiled, a small, real smile. It is funded unconditionally. Send my finance team the budget. He leaned forward. One condition. No Verano logo on the side. This is yours. That night, we found our own fragile peace. He came to the library just as I was closing up. He had not called. He just appeared, holding a flat, white pizza box, thin crust. We sat on the floor in the foreign language aisle, surrounded by the words of the world. We ate pizza from paper plates, and we did not talk about the hearing. We did not talk about Bianca. We talked about Mrs. Pavesi. We talked about his first trip to Sicily. We talked about my dream of seeing Florence. An old radio I kept at the desk was playing, some low, smoky jazz station. Luca stood up, brushing crumbs from his suit. He offered me his hand. Nadia Quill, he said, his voice soft. May I have this dance? And so I danced with the dawn of Riverton, a slow, shuffling circle on the worn carpet, surrounded by books. His hand was warm and firm at the small of my back. My head found the curve of his shoulder. I breathed in the scent of cedar and old paper. I could feel his heart beating, a slow, steady rhythm under my ear. He kissed me, and it was not the desperate, claiming kiss from the glass room. It was slow. It was simple. It was a promise. His eyes, in the dim light of the stacks, said all the things his words could not. The calm broke at dawn. Ari found me at my apartment. She was not calm. She was holding a tablet, her face grim. Bianca made her last move. She showed me the screen, a new filing on the city docket. It is a civil prosecution order, filed an hour ago. She's naming you as a co-conspirator. I read the words, my blood turning to ice. Bianca was accusing me, claiming I was a Verano plant all along, that I had conspired with Luca to defame her, that I had stolen her employee, Milo, and that I had intentionally incited the events at the gala. She was painting me as the villain. It is timed, Ari said, her voice clipped. The public UTIC hearing is tomorrow morning. She is discrediting her star witness you before you can even say a word. Luca was at my apartment in 10 minutes. It was a storm, his fury so cold it burned. She will not, he snarled. You are not going. My lawyers will handle this. They will file an injunction. They will bury her in motions. No, I said. I was looking at the fraudulent document, at Bianca's signature. She is telling a story, Luca, a very good one, that I am a liar and a manipulator. Your lawyers can fight the facts. They cannot fight the story. Only I can. I looked up at him. I am going to that hearing. I am going to testify. I am going to tell them the truth about the ghost agencies. I am going to tell them everything. Nadia, no. The fear in his voice was raw. They will crucify you, Bianca's lawyers. They are sharks. They will tear you to pieces on the stand. They will try. I put my hand on his face, forcing him to look at me. But this time, I am not alone. You promised to listen. So listen. He closed his eyes, his entire body tense. I need you to be there, I whispered. But I need you to stand behind me, not in front of me. You cannot be my armor tomorrow. I have to be my own. Let the commission, let the city, let her. Let them see me. He opened his eyes. The fight was gone, replaced by a deep, terrifying acceptance. I will be there, he said, his voice rough. Behind you. That night, I did not sleep. I sat at my small kitchen table. Emilia's worn book of Dante opened beside me. I prepared my testimony. I wrote my statement for the commission, for the press, for the city. I wrote it in clear, precise, librarian perfect English. I detailed the fake summons, the metadata, the warehouse, the threats. And then, on the very last page, I began to write in Italian. I was preparing my final blow. The hearing room for the Riverton Logistics Reform Council was not a courtroom. It was a theater. Every seat was taken. The press corps, smelling blood, lined the walls, their cameras a forest of glass lenses. The first 2 rows were not filled with lawyers or politicians, but with men and women in work boots and Verano maritime caps, the members of the Free Dock Compact, the port workers. They had come to bear witness. Bianca Cataneo was already seated. She was a vision of ice, flanked by a legal team that cost more per hour than I made in a year. They radiated an aura of expensive, hostile competence. On the table in front of them were newly printed, lavishly bound documents. Her opening move. The council chair, a weary-looking woman named Thompson, called the room to order. We will first hear from Miss Cataneo's counsel, who has filed a motion to legitimize the Bureau of Port Standards as a data partner to Viridian Quanta. Bianca's lawyer stood, a silver-haired shark. He was trying to retroactively justify the fraud to turn the ghost agency into a legitimate subcontractor of itself. It was a brilliant, insane, circular piece of legal theater. And we will then hear the testimony, Councilwoman Thompson said, looking over her glasses, of Miss Nadia Quill. I stood up. The room went silent. I could feel hundreds of eyes on me, the press, the workers, Bianca's cold, hateful stare. I walked to the podium. I adjusted the microphone. I looked out, and I found them. Don Salvatore, sitting in the front row with his men, his face impassive, and Luca, standing against the back wall, his arms crossed. He was not in armor. He was in a simple suit. He was exactly where I had asked him to be, behind me. His eyes met mine, and he gave a single, almost imperceptible nod. I took a deep breath. I looked at the council. I did not begin in English. I began with the formal, archaic Italian I had used for Don Salvatore, a greeting of respect to the chamber itself. Onorevoli membri del Consiglio, I began, my voice clear and steady. The room, expecting a nervous librarian, was stunned into silence. Bianca's lawyer actually frowned. Then, I switched. My name is Nadia Quill. I am a librarian, and I am a sign language interpreter. I gripped the sides of the podium. I am here today to talk about ghosts. Not ghosts of the dead, but ghosts of paper. ghosts created by data firms to look like the government. I am here to talk about what happens when a powerless, invisible citizen is targeted by a fake flag of power, designed not to protect but to extort. For 20 minutes, I told them everything. I did not just tell a story, I presented a case. The massive screens behind the council lit up, not with Bianca's forged documents, but with my evidence. This, I said, pointing, is the metadata from the first summons I received. The author field is scrubbed, but the digital signature belongs to a server block owned by Viridian Quanta. Click. This is the digital contract, extracted by Milo Crest, showing the line item payment from the Cataneo Combine for the creation and maintenance of the FCIB shell. Click. And this is the digital footprint of the website, the one with no laws and no directory. It was not hosted on a government server. It was hosted on a private server in an office park, registered to Viridian Quanta. I was a librarian. I had brought my citations. I built a fortress of facts, of metadata, of digital receipts. I proved, beyond any doubt, that the agencies were not just fake, they were a manufactured weapon. When I finished, the room was silent. Bianca's silver-haired lawyer stood up, his voice a condescending sneer. "Councilwoman, this is a fascinating and highly libelous piece of fan fiction. A disgruntled employee and a librarian have concocted a conspiracy theory against a respected businesswoman. Where is the intent? Where is the proof of anything other than a simple data-sharing agreement?" Bianca was smiling. She thought she had won. "I have one final piece of evidence," I said. Ari Santoro, sitting in the public records section, nodded to the technician. A new file played. It was audio, raw, unedited, from Milo's hard drive. Bianca's voice, cold and precise, filled the room. "I do not care about the specifics. Just make it look federal. I want Verano buried in paper. I want his sponsors gone. His port choked. Make it look real. Make it look federal." The room exploded. The press was shouting. Bianca Cataneo's face was a mask of pure, white-hot fury. She had been caught, by her own words. "This is inadmissible," her lawyer roared. "Illegally obtained." "It was obtained by a whistleblower," Councilwoman Thompson said, her voice like ice, "documenting a felony. It is admissible." Bianca looked back, her eyes scanning the room, desperate. She must have signaled them. The men in gray suits, the ones from the gala, Viridian's men, posted near the exits. Suddenly, the lights went out, the microphones died, the screens went black, a collective gasp from the room. They had cut the power. But they had forgotten who was in the front row. Don Salvatore Verano did not panic. He simply stood up. He turned, not to the council, but to the men in the hard hats. He did not speak. He just raised his chin. It was a command. Two of the port foremen, men who had worked the docks for 30 years, moved. They went to the emergency panel at the back of the room, flipped a heavy-duty switch and the thrum of a backup generator. The Verano generator that ran the port kicked in. The lights flickered, buzzed, and then snapped back on, brighter than before. Community power, real and tangible, had just overruled shadow violence. The gray-suited men were trapped, exposed, in a room full of light and witnesses. Councilwoman Thompson stared at Bianca. The theater was over. "This council finds," she declared, her voice booming in the restored silence, "that the entities known as the FCIB and the BPS are fraudulent constructs. All summons and violations issued under their name are hereby declared null and void." She was not finished. "We are referring the complete findings of this hearing to the Independent Maritime Justice Institute for the immediate and full prosecution of Viridian Quanta and its partners." And finally, a uniformed officer stepped up behind Bianca Cataneo. "Dante, based on the evidence of systemic fraud, conspiracy, and extortion, this council issues an immediate civil arrest warrant for Miss Bianca Cataneo." Bianca did not scream. She did not fight. She just stood. her face a perfect porcelain mask of hatred, as the officer put a hand on her arm. The room erupted, the port workers were on their feet, cheering, stomping, the press was a mob of flashing lights. I stood at the podium, my knees shaking, my hands gripping the wood. I looked for Luca, when he was still at the back of the room. He had not moved, he was not rushing to save me. He was not charging the podium to claim the victory. He just looked at me, his eyes burning with a pride so fierce it took my breath away. He was letting me have it. He was letting me be the hero. He stood back, and in doing so, he held me up completely. The end came at sunset. The chaos of the hearing had faded. The city was digesting the fall of an empire. I found Luca on the dock by the Aurelia Mare. The sky was a deep, impossible shade of purple and orange. He was not looking at the city. He was looking at me as I approached. I stopped in front of him. We did not speak. He reached out, his hand gentle, and cupped my face. I leaned into his touch, my hands finding his waist, gripping his jacket. This was the kiss, not the first spark of curiosity on the platform, not the desperate safe harbor kiss in the glass room. This was the one that came after the war. It was deep and sure and blessedly, wonderfully quiet. It was a kiss of equals. It was not a claim. It was an arrival. I wrapped my arms around his neck. His own arms circled me. His hands splayed flat against my back, holding me close. His breath was warm against my skin. "I love you," he whispered, the words a rough secret against my hair. "But I will not chain you." I pulled back just enough to see his eyes. "And I love you," I said, my voice as steady as my heart. "But I will not be captured." On the deck of the yacht, 10 yards away, Don Salvatore Verano watched the two of us. He held Emilia's book of poetry. A smile so rare it was almost a miracle touched his lips. He looked at me, then at the port, glowing in the dusk. He spoke in soft, satisfied Italian to the sea breeze. "La tua fiamma è abbastanza luminosa per l'intero porto." Your fire is bright enough for the whole port. He turned, not saying goodbye, and walked back into the cabin, leaving the future and the new light of the harbor to us. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I would love to connect with all of you. Where in the world are you listening from? Please drop a comment below and share your thoughts. Do not forget to subscribe to my channel, Mafia Boss Stories, and like this video. It would also be a huge help if you could support us by hitting the hype button, so this story can be heard by even more people.